What's up, Marvel Snap fans? I am Keith Franks of Cutlass Boardgames, a pro game designer. That's what I do for a living. And I thought I might take a stab at making some cards that I think would fit nicely into Marvel Snap. So, first up, we have Prowler. Running along the lines of what Daredevil does, in Daredevil letting you get perfect information on turn 5 on what your opponent is doing, Prowler does something similar, except you get to kind of choose when that information comes. So you could throw that out on turn 2 and get an idea of what kind of a thing your opponent is playing, which is really good for some decks that do nothing until later on. Or you play it towards the end to set up to get that perfect information for the big turn 6. There's a pretty good chance that this would be completely broken, considering Cataxian Probe is banned in every Magic the Gathering format. But that's because it draws a card for free, not because it gets to look at their hand. And so that's why you'll see that drawing a card is notably absent here, but looking at your opponent's hand seems like a piece of standard gameplay type of thing. Like if you could imagine, Love Letter has the priest. In the same way, Prowler will give you information about what your opponent has in their hand. It's not super aggressively costed, it's less than Sentinel, but it gives you pretty important information, especially if you use it in the mid to late of the game. Next up, we've got Tombstone. Now, I wanted to create a bunch of cards that operate as if you are playing from behind. You had a rubbish draw, or you don't think you've unlocked enough cards out of pool 3 yet, like this guy. And you just keep playing against decks that have all this stuff that's more crazy and exciting and better than what you have. Then some of the cards I've created today, like Tombstone, will give you opportunities to play from behind. Now, Tombstone basically says if you have 4 cards at this location, change this location to bar with no name. Now, bar with no name is a location that says the player with the least power here wins this location. Now, this is an interesting play around card. Like, you could put this in Mr. Negative and just have a 0 thing that costs 3, and then when you play it, if you don't have 4 things at the location, it's just a nothing that gives you 3 power, which is fine. Or if someone has like hobgoblined you, or they have like a ridiculously huge lead in this location, and you play this on 4, you're now winning that location. Also, it gets stopped by stuff like Cosmo, so it's going to be like strong and like maybe kind of busted. So maybe if this does get into the game, it would need to be costed more or something like that. But I like the idea of oh man, I can't win this. This location at all. I'm going to change it to bar with the name. Next, we've got the Ancient One. This is probably one of the ones I'm least confident on, but I wanted to have something that had a your deck has to do this in the construction of it. And so it's 3 costed, -2 power, but if your deck contains only even costed cards plus 8 power, which makes it a 3/6, which is pretty good. It's just like 1 better than Deathlock with no downside if you're able to get the ongoing happening. And then you can like double that ongoing with Onslaught, or Spectrum will boost it and all this kind of stuff. But that means that on the final turn, the last 3 cards in your deck have to be even costed cards, which means you could draw all your odd costed cards already, or you could just have none in your deck. But there's 2 locations, Let Your Gear, and the other one that just shuffles rocks into your deck. And rocks are not even costed cards, which means that the Ancient One would not be able to turn on unless if you draw all the rocks. But like a Korg shuts down the Ancient One. Alright? So it's not broken, but it's strong. And I like the idea of having build your deck around this, whereas a lot of the stuff we have at the moment that you build a deck around is utility rather than demanding, if that makes sense. Next up, we've got Batroc The Leaper. So this is another one of the playing from behind kind of cards, where on reveal, you swap a random opponent's card with Batroc The Leaper. So you'd play it, you go, hey, here's this 2-costed thing. I'm going to hope that I high roll and I take your best thing. This is like a big swing on the final turn, something that, Sarah Miracle would absolutely abuse. But I think that this would be really fun. And you can just imagine exactly what his in-play animation is, where he like literally hops across the other side of the screen. I think that could be kind of interesting. It's another one of those big RNG things like Gambit, where Gambit always, for me, low rolls and hits whatever is under armor. And then we have Loki, which is very similar to Batroc The Leaper, where it becomes a copy of a random opponent's card at this location. So it's a similar thing, where it meets something, and it's also trying to do what Morph does with more information. Between Loki, Morph, and Prowler is trying to build a kind of a see something, take something kind of trinity there, where if your opponent has just done Sunspot and then nothing for 5 turns, and then on the final turn plays Infinite, and then you reveal second and go Loki, is also great, right? In the same way that Leader does, but it costs less, so in theory you could do it and something else on the final turn. And just also not miss if it's not the thing that they've played on that turn. So this could also be really powerful, but again, it's RNG, because if they have more than one thing at that location, it's not going to hit as often. Then we have Mesmero. Mesmero is the ultimate, my deck sucks, I'm playing from behind, this opening hand is terrible, where you play it and it changes the location to Weird World. Weird World is a location where you draw from your opponent's deck instead of your own. So it would be really funny to play a Mesmero deck where you just have junk. Your deck's just horrible, and then you weird world your opponent and they can't do anything because your deck is just horrible. Or something like Electric Gear, where you just like, I'm just going to put 100 rocks in my deck and then I'm going to change it to Weird World. And your opponent's like, oh, I'm just going to draw rocks for the rest of the game. Which also could be, a lot of rock synergy with what's going on here. Next we have X23. So on reveal, destroy each player's weakest cards. So this is similar to Warrior Falls, where it at that location, Warrior Falls will destroy whatever the weakest thing if there's something bigger than it there. What X23 does is like a symmetrical effect, sort of like Moon Knight, where each player's weakest card will be destroyed. So you could use this to like needle out Bucky Barnes or needle out Nova on your side, and then hit whatever they're, like you get a free 1-drop out of them, or a 1 power thing from them, like Ant-Man, which gets bigger later, and like that's not horrible. But also if they're just playing huge things, then it's gonna just get something that's huge or whatever, which is pretty good. Like if they've just carnaged their entire state and they have just carnage left, and you're like, okay, well, X23 is pretty good here. But also is one of those effects where you can like leverage for yourself, and you can also disrupt your opponent, like Gambit. Then we've got GOG. So GOG is something I wanted to make similar to Galactus. Galactus is kind of like swing the entire game in this direction. It feels like you're going to lose unless like Galactus activates and you hopefully have Wolverine or something, and maybe you win on 5 power. And it seems kind of clunky. Like I haven't figured out how to make it super useful yet. And also you can't play with it anyway. But GOG basically turns a 3-location game into a 2-location game. So sometimes you're punting a whole location anyway. Right, and so let's say your opponent has a ton of stuff there, you've got 0, and then you've got 1 location that's bad and 1 location that's good. You play GOG, it destroys your worst location, and then if you're both, you and your opponent, winning 1 location, it's a tie, and then you're hoping that you're winning on the tiebreaker to win that game, instead of just blowing everything up. So GOG kind of forces a tiebreaker, and then you hope that you win the tie. Unless if you use something like Wong or Tamakaj, the location, to activate it twice, in which case you blow up 2 locations and then you hope that you win 1 location. It basically becomes a world ship. But I think that this would be interesting, and I think that having that option to use Wong and boost it would be really funny. And it lets you play around and like play the one big thing, like play really into one location, get your Iron Man out there and all that kind of stuff, and then blow up one that you don't care about, and then hope that you win on a tie. Like that's the most basic thing. And this was like sort of a stripped down Galactus was the idea. Another one of those playing from behind kind of cards, because it doesn't feel like there's too much in the way of catch up. Like if you just have a hand that's all 5s and 6s, because you didn't play Quicksilver, that's your own fault, right? And then you're like, okay, well, they've spent the first 4 turns of the game building up this one location. That's a really good location, and I can't beat that. And I'll lose on tiebreakers if it's still around at the end. But if I play GOG, it's destroyed. I might win on tiebreakers on this one location. I put 3 things in. And then, right, like if it's a turn 4, something big, turn 4, Warpath, turn 5, Iron Man, turn 6, GOG, and then win on tiebreaker. That's not terrible, right? So yeah, this is the custom cards that I created. I thought these would be something interesting. This would be something that I would love to discuss in the comments. If you think that they're horrible, if you think they costed terribly, if you have some suggestions on changes, or you have custom cards of your own that you've made, I'd love to see them. Get at me on Twitter with that stuff, at Cutlass Game. And I don't know, stick around. I've been doing a lot of Marvel Snap content lately. It's been a lot of fun. So if you've been enjoying that, hit subscribe so that I know to keep doing it. Or I'll do something else.